Hi, I'm Mikaela Parrick from PATV Channel 18, and today I'm touring Backpocket Brewing in Coralville.
So this is the first stop. Essentially on the outside of this wall right here, there are two large grain silos. You can see those from the road. Those house what we call our base grains. Essentially a couple of the different grains that go into pretty much every single one of our beers. Not all of our beers look the same, smell the same, taste the same, and that's because each one of our beers also gets a percentage of what we call our specialty grains. This is where you're going to get the majority of your flavoring from your beer. This one happens to be a darker grain, kind of a chocolate grain. Similar to coffee, the longer that you roast the grain, the darker the flavors are going to be, the bolder the flavors are going to be. Think like a coffee stout will get a lot of the darker chocolate grains. Usually stouts are more grain heavy than, say, IPAs or something like that. A lot more of your flavor in IPAs are coming from the hops than, say, the grains. But essentially what's going on is from those silos outside, they will get pumped, grain will get pumped into this large box behind us here. This is known as the grist box. And this is essentially just a big mill. It cracks open the housings and the grains, basically exposes the starches and the sugars. All of the good stuff that you're going to want to extract from those grains gets exposed in this process. The next step would be the brew house, and we can move on to that at this moment.
Okay.
So we are now in the brew house. This is where the actual brewing processes take place. Some of the artistry of it all kind of takes more place more so in here. What we're looking at is we have the mash tun and then the lauter tun. The mash tun is fed from that grain room that we were just in, from the grain, that grist box. That kind of powdery mashed up grains will get pumped into this large tank here. At this point, water is added. Basically, we're coming up with kind of a porridge-like consistency. And then also inside of this tank are a bunch of big rakes that will mash all the grain up together and essentially just combine it into a consistent porridge-like mixture. At this point, we're also starting to extract some of the sugars and some of the flavors from those grains. Once that has been completed, they will move that mixture over here to the lauter tun. At this point, that mixture will get deposited in somewhat of a bed of grain, and then water will be flowed through that, again extracting some of the flavors, the sugars, everything that we would like to take out of those grains is happening at this stage. That product, that kind of grainy, sugary, watery mixture, will get pumped back over to the mash tun once again. At this point, we will engage the process of the boil. This is heating up that mixture to mostly turn the unfermentable sugars that we've extracted from those grains into fermentable sugars that we can therefore use during the fermentation process. Once that boil has been complete and all the brewers are happy with everything in that brew so far, we will move that mixture, which is now referred to as wort, to the centrifuge is what we call this, big whirlpool. Basically what happens, it deposits that kind of hot, sugary wort that we were talking about into a circular pattern, which really extracts all of the solids or any of the extra kind of solids and liquids that we don't want in our brew. This is where those are separated out. All of that byproduct gets pushed out back to a depository that we have. Otherwise, tracking our brew, we have separated out any of the liquids and solids that we don't want in it, and we are moving on to heat treatment. Basically, this ensures that lagers hit fermentation at a lower temperature than ales, and therefore the lagers take a little bit longer during fermentation than ales do. Next, we can move on to fermentation. We are looking at the fermentation process, which moves that kind of hot, sugary wort mixture that I was talking about earlier. It moves them into these tanks, and from there, the yeast will be added. And they will sit inside these tanks for up to a number of weeks, sometimes only a couple of days. Again, depends on which beer that we are brewing. After the beer has been fermented and all those sugars have basically been converted into the alcohol, we will do what's called crashing the beer, and that's lowering the temperature inside of the tank. That therefore ends the fermentation process and allows the flavors in the beer to kind of come to their full fruition. And we'll move that into one of our packaging tanks over here. And then we'll move on to the actual packaging into bottles or bombers or kegs, which is what we are able to do in this facility, which we can look into now. So this is our packaging area. We do both kegs and bottles. All of our bottles are hand packaged. All of our six-pack carriers and cases and all that stuff is all handmade. I think on a good day, if we're up to full staff, that we can do about 3,800 bottles in an hour. Past that, they will move into our large keg cooler, which we can check out now. Kind of the final stop in the whole process before the beer leaves to go to either a bar or a Hy-Vee or some other distributor of scents. What I've been carrying around here is the Ray Gun, one of my favorite brews that we have. This one was actually kind of a challenge for us to brew. We're trying to start brewing it year-round, but we simply can't find the hops sometimes out of the year. And that's something that a lot of different breweries are facing, some of the challenges of the industry. But again, that's something that we're trying to overcome. As the industry grows, hopefully the demand will become more tolerable.
All right, well, thank you so much for talking with us.
No, thank you very much for coming. Glad to do it. Come by anytime.